Then lads, welcome back to my channel. My name is Brucey Boy and welcome to the next part of this cutting edge enlisted tutorial series, with this part focusing on the class we could all use a little bit more of, the Engineer. So before we begin, remember to hit the red button and press thumbs up, so let's get right into it. So, the first question, who or what is the Engineer? Well, this time it is a man. Not just armed with a rifle, but a hammer too. Yes, I know. Such new innovations in warfare could only be achieved when the engineers finally all combine their brain cells together and stop building boring things like infrastructure or transport, because, who needs a new bus anyway, when you could build a brand new high-caliber machine gun nest instead? So, to play an engineer, I have a useful diagram to show you. The engineer flowchart. First, you spawn in. Next, you build a rally point. You can never have too many of these, so build loads. Next, you go and build a defensive castle, or build weapons like AT or AA guns, and finally, you repeat this. Or die. One of the two. Anyway, this is more challenging than the rifleman, but you can handle it, right? Right? It's not rocket science, it's just selecting a building, then holding down a button. Hell, you don't even need to do that. You can press X and order a bot to do it for you instead. Anyway, now we'll move on to your inventory. And to start with, your primary weapon slot. Like the rifleman, you can pick from bolt-action or semi-automatic rifles, and these have the same benefits that they get from a rifleman, and so bolts for long range and semis for mid to short range. Look, you should be only using these to defend yourself from the enemy team when you spawn in, so only use them in a pinch or when you need to defend yourself as an engineer. You shouldn't be actively shooting people with your own rifle when you could be shooting them with your buildings. But in general, for engineers, you should use the most recent unlocked weapon that is available for that slot, or use whichever one you prefer, since there's no single good primary weapon for your engineers, so pick whichever one you think is your favourite. This is the secondary weapon slot. You'll notice it's already unlocked this time round, and it already has the engineering hammer in it. Now, you can't unequip this, so don't try, and you can only replace it if you have the rope hammer. I will go into better detail on what the hammer does a bit later. Now, I hate to repeat myself, but don't bother with the sidearm. They do little damage with little range, and they're pretty much only a slot filler. So, like with the rifleman, don't bother equipping them. It's a waste of silver orders. Next is your melee slot. And there is one item born for this slot on the engineer, the shovel. This handy-dandy tool allows the user to create trenches and holes, the most useful defences. Nowadays, these come with engineers when you buy one, so you only need to buy them when adding them to older engineers if you have them. The ability to build defensive structures on a whim is extremely useful, and especially good in the more open objectives, where you digging a trench can be a huge help to not only yourself but your team. You can also use them to dig towards the objective safely if there's a machine gun nest that seems to be mowing you down as you run across a field. The limit to the shovel is really only your imagination. And the dig limit. And concrete, you can't dig through that. Your next slot are grenades. Now, you don't need to worry about grenades as much, as you'll only get a good amount of use out of one or two of them. Support grenades are actually much more useful here. Smokes allow you to build a construction whilst being under attack. You can use them to hide where you are and what you're building, so it's a pretty good practical use here. Explosion packs will also help, since as an engineer you will focus tanks more, and so a grenade that can help you do that as well is always a welcome help. They can also be used to blow up engineer constructions as well if you need to get rid of either yours or the enemy's. So these two are a good option, however the rest won't give you too many advantages outside of what they already do for other classes. So in general, frags are good at killing, white phosphorus and molotovs are good for area denial, and impacts are just improved frags. So if you play more offensively as your engineer, or you tend to be on an attacking team more, these offensive grenades can be useful, But if you're indecisive, just go for the explosion packs, since they kind of act as a better multi-tool and a bridge between support and defense. Your next slot are your mines. Okay, so for mines, all of them are actually really useful on Engineer, but AP mines and AT mines can actually be pretty fun. If you combine them with your constructions, you can place some pretty good and effective traps. For example, you can place an AP mine behind a sandbag wall and kill someone when they vault over it. Or with AT mines, you can trick tanks into being funneled down a certain path with the use of check hedgehogs. So both of these are useful and let you become a trap master, which will piss the enemy off for sure. TNT packs are still useful, but just not as much. They're still good anti-tank weapons if you want a more generalist mine, but they aren't as good with traps since they require that you don't die and you can keep a sightline on where you actually placed it. So if you can't decide, pick TNT, but if you really want to set traps and have more fun, pick AP or AT mines, depending on your preferences, or you can just equip both in the same squad, because that'll work. Now, your backpack slot is next. Since you can't pick between a secondary slot or a backpack, you're forced into only using the backpack slot. But what backpack do I pick, I hear you ask? Well, I think it should be the backpack itself. Extra ammo should be saved for classes that use their primary weapon most of the time, and extra grenades isn't an awful choice, but still a bit redundant since you can get better use out of the regular inventory backpack. This expands your inventory by 2 slots, and with the big one, it can expand it by 4. Now, you should do this to allow you to equip both the medkit and tools. Since an engineer should also be supporting tanks, it makes sense that you should be able to repair them as well. Tankers will also be grateful since they don't have to worry about getting out and risking half their crew to machine gun fire. So, I think you should put it in a 50-50 split between medkits and tools, and you should be pretty good. Next, your flask and binoculars slot. Now, you should go for the flask. It's cheap, it's only 2 bronze orders, and its infinite stamina boost does help you get away if you're in a bad situation, but binoculars are still only good for making you look like you're cosplaying an officer, so pretty much only go for the flask. Now, it's time for perks, and the engineer perks are a bit more interesting since they have more specialised ones that are pretty good. For example, the 80% extra building materials. That one is a lifesaver, and I recommend you put it on every single one you can, since 8 extra building materials is pretty decent for building more defences. Building speed also helps, especially with the longer to build defensive buildings like AT guns or rally points. The ability to swap to your hammer through quicker secondary switching is good, but you may want to replace it with a more active ability like vitality, stamina, or run speed. Either way, the perk choice is up to you and how you play, but I highly recommend that you do invest heavily in the engineer-specific perks, though. Okay, so now all that's over, it's time to look at the main appeal of the engineer. The engineering, building, crafting, hammering tooling. The hammer, which is in your secondary slot. It allows you to bring up a menu that allows you to pick from a list of buildings, then shows some pretty important information. It shows you how many of each building you can build at once, how many resource points it will cost you, and how many resource points you have left. You also have other button presses that allow you to dismantle some buildings, giving you a few resources back, and also a button to refuel ammo on the defensive buildings. You should keep in mind though that the more useful or powerful buildings are more expensive and you can build fewer of them. But what are these buildings and which ones do I use, I hear you ask? Well, I can show you, can't I? First is the humble sandbag wall. This is a building that stops small arms fire from hitting your team below the waist, and is very good at it. You can build a generous 10 walls before the game stops you, and you'll find that is certainly enough. They work well at stopping people coming through windows and allow you to create a defensive position out in the open. They can also be used by all engineers regardless of what squad type they're in, so you can use them to protect both the objective and rally points. But tank shells and bombs can still destroy them along with high caliber machine guns, so be careful with them. Next is the most annoying building, barbed wire. You can build 10 of them, and this coil allows you to slow down anyone caught in it and make them take damage over time. But it isn't discriminate and will damage you and your teammates, so be mindful where you build them. A good place to put them is right underneath windows or similar things that people need to vault over, as this immediately slows them down and hurts them, allowing you to pick them off if you catch them in the act. However, they are weak and can be destroyed by the enemy relatively quickly. This curious device is the bane of all tankers, the Czech hedgehog. They're made from the carcasses of dead Czech hedgehogs, and you can build a total of 6 of these. These allow you to block a vehicle's path completely, since tanks can't destroy them with their main cannon, no matter what caliber it is or what shell they use, and so they're incredibly effective at blocking any annoying tankers that keep rushing the objective. They're also a pretty efficient door blocker if you put barbed wire around them as well, so they're a multi-tool really. The ammo point is next, and it's a building that is just as important as the rally point, since it is the only way in-game you can replenish your ammo. So build these everywhere. Make them in the ceilings, the walls, the floors, the doors, your squad's heads. Build them everywhere, and you will have a very grateful team. Well, at least I will be grateful for you. They also run out, so remember to rebuild them if they do run out of ammo. And you only have 3, so plaster all 3 everywhere. A good rule of thumb is whenever you build a rally point, also put an ammo point next to it. But a rally point? What's that, I hear you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. If you have ever lost a game in Enlisted, one of the key reasons you failed is most likely not having enough rally points. You need these to win, so build them whenever you can. These should be built whenever you have the option, but be careful as to where you put them. The best places to build these are in cover, so normally in a building, but if that's not available, then go for the shovel and dig a ditch to hide the rally point in. Overall, the more you build of these, the better you'll realise they're the key to victory. But not all engineers' buildings have a passive buff, you know. Some are offensive. The first of the offensive fight-backy engineer buildings is the AT cannon. It can only be built by engineer squads and has to be unlocked through the squad upgrade tree. But this cannon is one of the best weapons in Enlisted, since you can not only fight tanks with them, but you can also use their HE, which they have more of, to fight against large waves of infantry. And if you put them in a good spot far away, you can easily become a monster with them. They're really good at destroying defences on capture points as well. However, they do have limited traversal aim, and you will be required to push them forward rather slowly, which does put you in danger. And you can still be killed easily by tanks, bombs, and infantry as well, so do be careful when using them. Next is the AA gun, or anti-aircraft gun, which is used to, as you guessed, be aircraftist. 2 of these can be built and used against the enemy, but you should keep in mind that they can only be used against enemy aircraft and not infantry, since they can't actually aim down below a certain axis. They have a high fire rate and only need 1 or 2 barrages to actually kill a plane, but make sure to either build them in an open area or along a route where you can see a lot of planes and you have a clear shot. The MG nest is next, and it is pretty underwhelming. It is good, mind you, it just lacks the more power of the heavy machine gun nest. You can build one of these and they cost the most building materials, but they are the easiest to use. It's a machine gun nest. Point shooty end at people and kill them. However, it is worth noting that you will become a target with this, so do be careful. They also have a limited amount of shooty time to make up for the no consumption of ammo buff. When they do overheat, you can't fire them until they have fully cooled down. The heavy MG nest is the previous building, but just better in every single way. Basically, take everything good about the regular machine gun nest and make it even cooler and more cancerous to fight, and you have the heavy machine gun nest. They can only be built by machine gun squads, so that means they can't really be spammed everywhere, but that is for good reason. One of these in a very defended position can kill a whole team and their tanks, so to get the most out of them, they're best used in the Pacific, Moscow or Tunisia, where you can not only just kill loads of enemy infantry, but also the weaker vehicles, and you will find that they are incredibly effective at it. Pulemets can only be built by engineers in Stalingrad, normally, but apparently they are moving to Flame Trooper squads in Eastern Front maps soon, so that's cool, I guess. Anyway, Ampulemets are basically a mounted machine gun, but they shoot Molotov cocktails. They're really good at door blocking and area denial, but they're kind of painful to find a good place to build them, and their fire rate is a bit too slow for my liking. But hey, maybe you'll get some godlike kill streak with them. Overall then, that's it from me. However, if there is one piece of information you take on board from this video, it should be to be creative with your engineers. Have fun, be stupid. If the engineer has all these toys to play with, then use them all and experiment to see what you like best. So go out there and build 80 cannons in buildings, dig trenches galore and spam barbed wire all over the objective. So, in conclusion, find your own way of playing engineer and enjoy it yourself. Anyway, before I get too sappy, remember to press the red button and like, as well as the bell, so I can still impart my ramblings onto you. Anyway, that's it from me, and I'll see you in the next video. Good night.